let's talk about core wound. The core wound, the core wounds. In my view, the core wound is actually the source for all of those limiting beliefs and limiting repeating patterns. Now, there are some big lies that we hear from limiting beliefs and patterns, and so let me just say that the core wound is telling us all this one big lie. Until you arrive at a certain point in your life, in your future, until then you are unworthy. And wrapped up in that lie is another really big lie, which is that there just is some future point. It's always going to be future, and you may or may not be able to reach it. If you did, everything would be better, everything would be good, but it's in the future, always in the future. And the reality of a life journey that is on the ascension path, as I assume you are, I know that I am, the reality is that life and the ascension path is a series of spiritual awakenings, and that all of the ascension experiences, they're not happening in the future. Ascension is now. I'm presenting here a video series that I think you'll find highly valuable if you stick with me. I'm going to be presenting some personal stories of awakening, and all of these awakenings and experiences are happening both in very mystical ways, like astral projections and all that kind of stuff, and also in mundane life ways, like emotional healing, and there's nothing mundane about that. I'm going to be giving you some specific tools as well, tools and techniques that will help you to connect with your ascension path. I think this is going to be a really fun ride, albeit sensitive but really expansive. So thanks for being here and stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Charmed Life podcast. This podcast is all about magic, metaphysics, mysticism, and the unconditional love of the universe, and I am your host. My name is Trisha Carr. Welcome to this video and this series of videos in which I'm going to be sharing some personal stories, and some of the details of which I've never shared before at all. Some I have shared in part, and I'm going to be doing this in several different, like 5 parts, something like that. So thank you for being here. I want to start by saying that recently I buried my career. I saw that the old manifestation of my career was in fact dead, and that it was time for me to release it for good, to grieve. I actually had an astral funeral. I had a ceremony, and I opened a grave in the morphogenetic fields, and I put my career in there. I covered it up and I wept over it. And it was only a few feet away from my beloved cat and birds who recently passed. Now, that's actually the end of the story. Well, it's the most current part of the story, pretty much. And I'm going to start from the beginning. And what's interesting, of course, even as I say beginning, there is an illusion of there being any end or any beginning. And that's what awakening and ascension is all about. Because the path is, as we know, a spiral, and the ascension path of light, I'm saying that so you can feel it, is just that series of awakenings. All right, so I'm telling these stories now because I have a sense that as you hear my story, you're going to hear your story. That's just how the human connection is. Not all of the details and the events and everything in my story, well, or even the time period or the characters, it's not going to be yours, but the movement from victimhood to freedom. That's what I am hoping that you'll feel expanded in and recognize in my stories. So I'm telling these stories because in the telling of these stories, I'm acting upon my awakening, manifestation. This actually requires action. It is about only 10% action, but it does. That 10%, nothing can happen unless we do the action. It's, as they say for manifestation, it's 80% mindset. And I think it's more like 90% of charging it up coherently and then releasing it. And the releasing is the movement. So that's what I'm doing here. Now, I have been actually holding myself in prison for a while. I've been holding myself in prison of someone else's creation, and also protecting the identity of that the person and persons, really, the people who created these prisons that I have held myself in. And I'm the jailer. So this is my prison break. And I want you to know that this is, while I'm going to be talking about things like narcissism, and I'm going to be looking at the metaphysical and spiritual mechanics of narcissism. And if you're talking about narcissism, you're also talking about codependency. And I'm going to be talking about that. But this is not about how some people were really, really bad people. And that's the moral of this story, is that I am a victim. In fact, I'm going to talk about how I am very powerful, and I hope that you will feel that you are very powerful too. I'm just going to tell you a little bit of the backstory that leads to the wrapping together and to me actually seeing where some patterns, limiting patterns, were repeating themselves. Repeating patterns are held together by limiting beliefs. And all of those are being signaled from the core wound. You might want to take that down. That's a good thing to journal about. All right, first of all, I'm going to move through some of this a little bit swiftly, trying not to give us too many details. From age 0 to 11, I lived in a home, a family life that was fraught with violence and alcoholism. My father was a rage-filled, violent, really, really sick man. He had a really bad disease of alcoholism and repressed rage that exploded out of him. And so there was violence. My mother was beaten. He didn't directly beat my sisters and me, but we would get caught in the crossfire. And there was just this dynamic that my parents had that was so dangerous. And actually, in addition to that, what is really holding the glue of that mess together is that we also were pretty much under the poverty level. My father was incapable of maintaining steady work. I mean, some people are highly functioning alcoholics and rageaholics. My father was not so much. At least every now and again there was some functioning, but he was mostly not very functional. My mother was busy with 4 children, so she did work but at the same time, my mother was also dealing with all of her deep core wounds. So in this time period, from 0 to 11, while there were guns sometimes being shot in my household, while there were times that I went to school and I think they forgot to feed me. My mother didn't intentionally abandon me, and that's my genuine look at it, but there was too much going on. So there was neglect. And so I'd sometimes be at school and too hungry, and my teacher had to call the nurse, and it was sad. I feel mostly about that. I feel pretty detached from it. I really feel sad for my mother and what she lived through, and of course for my dad, because he was quite sick. I want to say that during that period, 0 to 11, the things I remember the most, along with some of that other horrible stuff I just listed, so that some of the things I remember the most were my connection with my animals and how we were able to dance and play and talk. One of my sisters and my dad are natural animal communicators, so it was very normal for us to just be like, yeah, the cat said this. And then my sister would be like, yeah, I know, she told me she doesn't like that food. And I said, yeah, but she said she likes this food. Oh, okay, great. It was perfectly I didn't even know until I was 39 that animal communication was a thing. I just thought some people didn't like animals. I thought, of course, well, yeah, you know what they're saying, because I grew up in a house like that. And I just thought I didn't have any other people in my life who liked animals as much as I did. That's the only reason why. That was so beautiful. I also had imaginary friends. So if you had imaginary friends, with my air quotes, those are your spirit guides. And I carry through the very strong memories of those imaginary friends, one of whom I had named Little Mama. And these imaginary friends were so much a part of our lives that my sisters will even ask me, how's Little Mama and Polish? Those were 2 of my imaginary friends. Little Mama, I found out by a path of evidences before she revealed herself as Little Mama, the imaginary friend from childhood. I was connecting with the spirit guide who gave me 7 different names for herself. Lee, Lelia, Layla, all these kind of Lily. I had journaled them all down, and then found out 2 months later that my great grandmother's name was Lelia, And that as I went and looked up, because I didn't know her name, looked up my great grandmother's name in the ancestry.com census records, all of those names I had journaled were on different census records. Like they had either misspelled it or they had given a different version of her name. Oh, this is little Lily or something like that. I found all of those there. And then I said, "Are you my great grandmother?" to this spirit guide I've been connecting with in meditation. And she said, "Yes." And she showed me a picture of herself. And I'd never seen a picture of my grandmother before, great grandmother. And then I asked my mother eventually, "Did you know your grandmother? And was she short?" And my mother confirmed that. And so this is why I called her Little Mama, because she presented herself to me as a child. I'm like your little mama, because my mother is tall, and my grandmother, this Lilia's daughter, is also tall, but she happened to be short, so she referred to herself as Little Mama. So magical things are happening, even during this chaotic and turbulent time of 0 to 11. Now, move 11 to 13, age 11 to 13, and my mother and I had left my father. My sisters were all out of the house, and we had these 2 years where my mother and I were on our own, and my mother was, I really, again, my heart goes out to her because she was really struggling. Really struggling. She worked 2 jobs. She had to leave me alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. I didn't mind that. I was fine and I was safe. But I know it worried her. And but during this time, it was like there was a prison break that had happened there. And so even though my mother was still worried, it didn't feel as poverty stricken because my mother didn't have like these other burdens that were taking away from the conservative funds, resources that we had. I was able to start singing lessons, dancing lessons. I was a cheerleader. I was in the school plays, and I had this wonderful group of friends. And my mother did everything she could to provide that for me. And I really felt like we were partners. So that was 11 to 13. And then at 13, my mother began a relationship with the person who would become her husband. And this is the real hard stuff here. I'm going to just give you some of the details that relate to the limiting pattern that I am just freeing myself from once again. And this is that in that 13 to 18, from age 13 to 18, I was abused, is putting it lightly. This person, my mother's husband, was a narcissist at to the most overt and flamboyant degree. He hurt my mother. He didn't put his hands on her, so that was an improvement. He didn't beat her. But he did put his hands on me. He didn't hit me. He sexually assaulted me. And honestly, while that was crossing my boundaries and creating control, it was more of the mental and emotional abuse. That was just like to push the mental and emotional abuse further. Everything that I did, I couldn't walk or do anything without being ridiculed and just told I was wrong and bad. I really felt like and I said this a lot, I live with someone who hates me. Like, why does he want to live with me? Why did he pick to live with us? Because he hates me. To be around someone who you feel like you're hated by them. And the control was, there were so many points of control. There were so many, I couldn't talk on the phone except for once per night, and it was for 15 minutes, and I had to set a timer for 15 minutes, and I had to sit in the kitchen at the bar, and he would usually sit right next to me, so he would listen to me talking on the phone, a 15-year-old girl trying to talk to her best friend, or God forbid I had a boyfriend, and I could only talk to one of them, and for 15 minutes. And that's only one thing. He would also he would go and look into my trash can and mark on the calendar when my cycle was. The violation was deep. And then also was, I couldn't walk through a room without having hands on me that were inappropriate. And the ridicule was just nonstop, and it was a lot. And the tricks and the games and the ways to catch me and, set me up to fail at something and then punish me for it. And then there were also these periods where he would ignore me, for months, as if I were a ghost in the house. And that was weird because I was in one sense relieved. On the other sense, it feels really awful to be diminished like that in your own home. Now, the great part of this is all based, this is junior high and high school. In high school, I did pretty well in school, considering I did well in the subjects I did well in. I got like a C in math. I got an A in geometry, but I did great in English. I excelled in theater, and I had so much fun in theater. And my theater teacher was like a father figure. He was wonderful. And my mother knew how much joy and freedom and expression I felt in those activities, and hid them from him, and coached me to keep them hidden. Because if he were to find out how much joy, fun, and expression I was feeling, he would have prohibited it. He would have made me stop doing all of it, just because he didn't want me to have any fun or freedom or expression. So I moved out when I was 18, as soon as I could, as soon as I graduated from high school. And there was this period after that I kind of like backslid into this feeling of the previous household. The first one with my father. I felt really insecure for resources. I mean, of course, I was 18 and I had a lot of PTSD, so I didn't make money or do very well making money. I was feeling very isolated. I had few friends, and many of them were unkind and ridiculed me. Not all of them. I had like one friend who was dear. And so it was almost like a different kind of security to move back into an old pattern, because it was freedom from that other pattern. And you see, what happened in that is that I had to hide in my life. It was almost like how if a person is gay, and I don't mean to hijack an experience like this, but when we're in the closet and there's like just one place where you can go to be yourself, that's it. That was what it was like for me, to be able to go to school, and my mom helped me to hide it, and to be able to be in the theater room, And so that was, I also took myself to church because I felt like they couldn't tell me not to do that. Now, how this is a pattern that has repeated itself that I am breaking free from now takes me to all the way up to 2017. And in 2017, I met someone who became a business partner. I'm going to tell the details of the story in the next video, but I'll just tell you that the ridicule, the hiding myself, and the constant asking me to suppress my identity, crossing boundaries, the criticism, and all of this done also behind closed doors so that the public didn't see it. I'm going to tell you the details of that. I'm going to give it to you in the second video, though. What I want to say is that when I was 18 years old and younger, I couldn't leave. I mean, that was something I had to reconcile in myself. Could I have left? I would have been a ward of the state. I mean, I didn't have other relatives to go to, so I couldn't leave. Now, the repeating patterns for adults, that the moment that you recognize you're in an abusive or toxic situation or relationship, so this might even be a career, this might be a job. That's why I say situation. I just want to encourage you that the time to exit is now. Now, having said that, the time to exit is now, but your exit might take a little bit of a walk. I wouldn't want anyone to, put themselves in a bad position. But when you choose in your heart that you're exiting, then that's when the healing begins, even if you're in the situation for a certain amount of time. So I'm going to dig more into that in the next video. And what I want to tell you is that there are so many portals that were opened during these adventures, that all of them have been, all of the energy that of the abuse, and as a child, that is definitely there are no other options. So it's if you abuse a person who is either young or somehow a care dependent adult, that's the height of abuse, because there are few choices. However, in retrospect, those choices got to be made. And what I mean by that is, as an adult, even though those things happened when I was a child, as I see what occurred and as I healed from them, I am helping her. I'm helping the 15-year-old her. I'm helping the 13-year-old Trisha. Now, I'm going to actually give you some tips and tools here, but before I head to that, I want to share with you that to check the comments, or not the comments, actually leave a comment. That's one thing I want to say. Check the description, because I have one-on-one sessions and I have intuitive development programs, and I have and by the way, my intuitive development programs, these aren't just courses that you just take education. They are containers of group coaching with spiritual osmosis and community that will blow your mind. So have a look at that. Those are always going on. And I'm going to move now into how you can use anything, like even a terrible childhood experience like I've had, to be able to more powerfully move along your ascension path. And these are things that I did when I was a kid, even though I didn't know it, and things that I'm using now. Let's talk about some tools and techniques to help you in your ascension path. And this one I want to share with you, I'm calling developing honesty, developing self-honesty. You see, in spiritual awakening content, we are often talking about authenticity, and that's valuable. I don't know how much we are talking about, or at least that I hear about, that we're actually talking about honesty. And let's be honest, self-honesty is the only way we could be authentic. And that's what I'm intending to do with this video series too, is to be honest. So in these stories that I'm sharing, and the ones that I shared today, I heard lies about myself. I heard lies about what it means to be able to survive, and it triggered my fight-flight response. And because of, how trauma works, I held on to those lies. And then I kept telling myself those same lies. That's, again, that sort of the recipe for a core wound. Now, as a part of the ascension path, becoming more and more honest with yourself, when it is the gateway to being able to take those bad experiences and let them be the gold through alchemy. So how do you know that there is a place to be more honest with yourself? Anytime you're afraid, honestly, anytime you're afraid, if you're afraid to have a conversation, if you're afraid to look at something, if you're afraid to move forward, anything that you can imagine, I'm afraid, then it means that there is some lie within you that says you're unsafe and that it is unsafe to be you. And it's not really ever true. I mean, if you genuinely were in a life-threatening circumstance, then then fear is your friend. But most of the time, I hope, most of the time when we're afraid, it isn't because we're in a life-threatening circumstance. And this is the opportunity for there to be a deeper layer of self-honesty to be discovered. So here's the tool and technique. And this is what I want to share with you. And this is, just take a moment when you notice a fear, rather than running away from it or pushing it away, or just, I don't want to think about it, or however you might be dealing with it at that time. Take a moment to ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And it can be anything great or small, and it may actually be your greatest fear, but your greatest fear to let that bubble up. We want to let it bubble up. We don't want to force it. We want to, because we don't go poking around into areas of our psyche and our shadow. We don't poke and we don't prod. We let them come up when they're ready, because our natural organic healing resourcefulness will just show it to us when we're ready. So just use the fear that is present. It is going to be showing you what it is that is ready to be unmasked and to be healed. So don't force yourself to uncover something that would, that's actually you're protecting yourself from. But if you do know this, that if you're recognizing a fear, it is the opportunity. So if you ask yourself, what am I afraid of? That is opening the portal for self-honesty. So one of these recent days, it was about 6 months ago, I think it was. And I kind of asked myself what my greatest fear was. In fact, actually, I was listening to Bashar talking to someone else, and he asked that person, what is your greatest fear? And I blurted it out to myself while I was walking with headphones on. I said, oh, that I can't take care of my animals. Now, through these stories that I'm telling you, I actually have uncovered, that fear. I got to confront it honestly directly in October, this past October, because one of my cats passed away. And as I've been releasing these limiting patterns, I recognized that not only did I get to confront it that way, but when I was very young, and then in that 13 to 18 years of age experience, I had to say goodbye to animals, and I didn't have, complete stewardship over them because I was underage or a child. And when I left at 18, I had to leave behind my cat, not because I couldn't take her with me. I had an apartment, I could take her with me. I was just refused to take her. So there's a little thread there that is showing the whole context of everything. Anyway, as I tunneled myself back into ancient memories of my life, and I recognized that an answer of what, to what I was afraid of was I'm not worthy of having the care of my animals. You see, that's what I was told then. So I sat in that fear, and I was just able to find the conversation with myself so that I could tell myself the truth, that I am worthy and that these animals picked me, and that I am doing the best that I can, and that I am a resourceful steward. So how do you find those honest conversations with yourself? Well, really, journaling is a valuable tool in this. And whether you write with your hand or you're typing, it doesn't really matter. Whatever you feel most drawn to or most comfortable with. But the reason it's so beneficial is because writing is an idiomotor response. And ideo refers to subconscious. Motor refers to conscious and material. It means the body. So whether you're typing or writing, you're taking subconscious information, you're flowing it out into the manifested plane, and you're realizing it. So you can have these conversations with yourself. What are you afraid of? Hear yourself. Listen to yourself compassionately. I am afraid of having this conversation with my partner because I'm afraid that he or she is going to judge me or be disappointed in me or get mad at me or, not be supportive. So you see, we haven't even, in this metaphor I'm giving, we haven't even involved the partner. It doesn't have anything to do with the partner because it doesn't matter even if we've seen something in the past. If one of those things have happened before, this is a whole new me, and this is a whole new partner on that day. And if we haven't brought it to the place of conversation because we're afraid to, it's all about the conversation I'm having with myself. I deserve to be able to have open and vulnerable conversation with my partner. That would be the conversation of self-honesty for myself. What happens if we don't have self-honesty? Well, then we project and we place the blame outside ourselves. We say my partner wouldn't understand without even giving the partner the opportunity to. We say that, well, society won't accept me. Well, we say that that I've tried it before and that's just not how the world works. Or we say because there is some kind of, conspiracy to hurt people like me. And I'm not saying that some of these things aren't true. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But if we haven't even brought it to the surface, if we're projecting it out and we're still afraid, then we have layers of self-honesty to discover. And self-honesty fosters self-empowerment. And what we're doing in this too is that when we're journaling and we're letting that subconscious to conscious, that non-physical to physical to happen, it is also closing the loop of your masculine and feminine. It is letting your masculine serve your feminine and your feminine support your masculine. And every one of us has, parts of masculine and feminine. And you're expediting your healing process. And you're providing a container for your self-honesty. And if you feel like you don't have anything to journal about in any moment, I promise you, if you sit down and begin the process, it will begin to flow. And if you want something to start with, you can also start with venting. It's okay to complain a little bit as long as you have the goal after the complaining to move toward the self-honesty and the compassionate listening and the fact that you intend to not just stay in the complaining, but venting can be helpful. But again, like you're listening to your best friend. saying, my job is so this. You were listening compassionately. And then we go, okay, well, what can we do about it? How can I support you in this? Either do or support, Now, if you want something to start with your journaling practice, I have for you the practice of sentence stems. A sentence stem is a journaling practice that is where you take a sentence that's partially completed, and it's designed to prompt a deeper reflection and self-exploration. So we're finding that self-honesty, and it provides a sort of structured starting point. It helps us to bypass the resistance of the critical mind so that we can ground and close the loop of the conscious and subconscious. And so by completing a sentence or the sentence stem, you can discover insights, you can clarify your emotions, and you can cultivate that deeper self-honesty and self-awareness. So, for example, the truth I have been avoiding about myself is, and let it flow. Try not to edit it. Try not to be critical of it. Try not to, if you might want to be creative and just let it flow. Here's another sentence stem. If I were completely honest with myself, I would admit that. And here's another one. A pattern I keep repeating, even though I know better, is. And the thing about doing this self-journaling practice, this is, again, how, I took what is my greatest fear is, and I found that one. And I was able to, it tunneled all the way back to being 5 years old. And it tunneled all the way back up through to being 18. And having to walk away and having no choice. And at the same time, it brought me to the place where I feel really, I don't just feel, I am really empowered. I am really free. So stay tuned for the next video. I'm going to take you to that, to that place where I said in 2017, I made a new relationship that repeated some of these patterns. Now, albeit in a lot of ways, they were nowhere near as, well, definitely not as violent because it wasn't harm to a child. It wasn't even physical harm, but emotionally, there were such similarities. The patterns were so similar. That's where I'm going to go with the next video. So again, please like, subscribe, share, comment. I would love to hear your stories of self-honesty and self-discovery. And also, check that description, one-on-one work, group coaching, coursework, opening your intuitive abilities, rising to your mission as a spiritual leader. That is what I am here to help guide and support for you. So that's what I have for you. Thanks for tuning in. I love you, whoever you are.